Thank you very much, Sergio, for the kind invitation and for your kind words. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with the listeners, with everyone today. As you said, such a beautiful day out there. It is. Some people are hugely committed to the cause to be here with us today. So thank you to all the listeners. So without any further ado, and following the presentation of Nicolette, I would like to say that Sergio gave me the title Climate Change in Youth Sport. And once I had that title, I scratched my head several times thinking, oh gosh, what change can I capture in 20 minutes? And of course, it would have been within coaching, as this is my area of research and work. And I'm glad to say that changes have happened within coaching over the years. And these changes have been very positive for coaching and for our athletes, young or old. I will talk about one specific change that I have witnessed over the years. I would like to talk about some notions initially that are very common in our practices and in our conversations with our colleagues within coaching. So you won't be surprised if I said that I'm just trying to change the slide. I don't seem to be able to. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it must take some time. There is some delay probably in the system. Coaching has changed, and it is much different from what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we have seen a shift from being coach-centered to being more athlete-centered. And what I'm keen to talk about is later on, about a combined approach to coaching that I have recently started referring to it as the coach-athlete-centered approach to coaching. I know that we all know these concepts, but I'd like very briefly to describe them so that we are all on the same wavelength in terms of what these concepts refer to and mean. So coach-centered approach to coaching is an approach that we have the coach as the focus, and the coach is at the heart, at the center of coaching. Here, what we expect is that the coach imparts, transmits knowledge, skills to athletes. And what we also see in this approach is that the coach leads, commands, orders, controls and directs his or her athletes. Therefore, there is very little choice that the athletes have. And as a result, the athletes are very passive in this type of coaching. Of course, this was very typical coaching 30, 40 years ago. When I was an athlete, for sure, I don't think my coaches ever asked me how I wanted to be coached. What were my dreams and aspirations, what were my goals. It was very much coach driven. We see a shift now from coach to athlete, and we purport that the athlete-centered approach is a good approach, because in this approach, the athlete is the focus and the athlete is at the center of coaching. Athletes direct their own learning. Athletes ask questions and coaches ask questions to their athletes, athletes execute activities, drills independently and in association with fellow athletes or teammates. So here we see a diametrically opposite where now the athlete has got a lot of choice first and foremost, and he or she is very active in the coaching process. Before I go to this combined coach-athlete centered approach that I have started talking about in the recent year or two, let me share with you some further thoughts about the coach and athlete centered approaches. As I highlighted or hinted a little earlier, These approaches sit at the separate ends of a continuum, at the opposite ends. And as a coach, you either apply a coach-centered approach or an athlete-centered approach. Now, it has been argued in the literature that an overemphasis on either the coach or the athlete leads to rigidity and hampers flexibility. And we all know as coaches that flexibility, agility, adaptability are important ingredients of coaching, of the coaching environment. So if we just focus on the coach or on the athlete, we may miss the broader picture of the development and growth of the people that we work with. So if, for example, focus on the athlete and their needs, we may neglect other much broader aspects of their development. In addition to that, I would also like to highlight that an athlete-centered approach, in my eyes, and through my experience and research work, it will appear that neglects the coach's role, with an emphasis on the athlete and a huge shift from coach to the athlete. There is an obvious to me anyway, play down of the coach's role. Coaches are an authority figure, and as an authority figure, they have knowledge, they have the capacity and the skills and the competencies to guide, instruct, influence, and lead their athletes. And all of this, I feel, is lost within the athlete-centered approach. And I believe that coaches, as much as they are athletes, have an important role to play and needs to be acknowledged and valued. In addition, like in the coach-centered approach, the athlete-centered approach doesn't acknowledge the important role of the relationship that these people develop and maintain over the course of their sporting journey. The athlete-centered approach, in my eyes, doesn't provide a basis for togetherness. It doesn't provide a basis for togetherness and connection between the coach and the athlete. There is an absence of good quality, solid, meaningful relationships between young athletes and adult coaches, or indeed any athlete and coach at whatever level they may operate within the athlete-centered coaching approach, as it doesn't exist within the coach-centered approach. So this brings me to maybe suggesting and proposing to you this combined coach-athlete-centered approach to coaching, whereby the relationship is at the heart of it. This approach values both individuals, both the coach and the athlete, and their joint contributions are taken into account. The combined approach embraces the give and take that exists within the coach and the athlete partnership. This reciprocity, this give and take, the reciprocity and bidirectionality that exists between coaches and athletes is key to genuine, authentic connections and form the basis for their growth, development, and progress within sport. So, from coach-centered to athlete-centered, to what I propose a coach-athlete-centered approach to coaching. So I invite you to reflect and think whether this approach is something that you could employ and apply. This approach focuses on the athlete and coach joint contributions and underlines that coaching is an interpersonal affair where neither the coach nor the athlete can do it alone. They need one another for maximal effect. At the heart of coaching lies the combined interrelating between the coach and the athlete. What goes on between the coach and the athlete is very important for effective and successful coaching. And therefore, the quality of the relationship between these two people is paramount. And of course, it's not something that I have advocated for so many years within sport as a researcher and academic. My colleague Sergio and his colleague Cliff Mallet in Australia have highlighted the importance of relationships between coaches and athletes, perhaps at the highest level of sport, but equally in youth sport, I believe, is valid and important. And if you don't take it from academics, then please take it from some high-profile coaches and athletes who have very publicly and honestly talked about their relationships and the central aspect that they have played to their success in sport and personal satisfaction at the same time. So if relationships are important and you're happy with that element, then what does a good quality coach-athlete relationship look like? Now, admittedly, relationships are rather fluid, elusive, difficult to capture. Can we provide a systematic, tangible way to capture such a phenomenon, which is important for coaching and sport? Well, over the years, and since actually 1997, when I was a PhD student at the University of Exeter, and since then until now, we tried to capture thousands of coaches and athletes' thoughts, opinions about what that relationship is about. And using their perspectives and thinking and articulation, we have come up with a model that simplifies a very complex phenomenon. And this one I would like to present to you today. This model captures the quality of the coach-athlete relationship using four simple constructs: closeness, commitment, complementarity, and co-orientation. So let me very, very briefly describe these constructs in turn. Closeness refers to the tone, the affective tone of the relationship, and the bond, the affective bond that the coach and the athlete develop and maintain over time. And there are four relational properties that are key for closeness: trust, respect, appreciation, and liking for one athletes or with your coaches. Then ask yourself, how much trust is there? How much respect? Do I respect my athlete? Does my athlete respect me? And so on and so forth. So these are important questions to ask if you want to gain an insight into closeness. Then we've got commitment. Commitment reflects coaches and athletes' thoughts, intentions, willingness, motivation to maintain a close relationship over time. And commitment is very important, and research has actually highlighted that, because commitment is the glue between the coach and the athlete, especially when coaches and athletes undergo difficult times, tough times. So when there is poor performance, burnout, injury, deselection, if commitment is strong, then the likelihood of the coach and the athlete to maintain together is much more likely. And we want coaches and athletes to maintain relationships, because success and performance development don't happen over time. It takes time. Then we move into complementarity. Complementarity captures coaches and athletes, cooperative acts of interaction. Complementarity is synonymous to cooperation. And cooperation comes into being when you observe coaches and athletes being responsive to one another and to each other's effort, being receptive, being open to each other's views and thoughts and opinions, being friendly as opposed to being hostile, cold, or distant, and being at ease and comfortable in each other's presence. Also, complementarity or cooperation captures the roles that coaches and athletes assume in the coach-athlete relationship. And on the whole, coaches have very specific roles to undertake, and this is to lead, to instruct, to orchestrate, to influence their athletes. And on the other hand, athletes, on the whole, are expected to filter information in and out as they see fit, take advice, grasp and notice what coaches may be saying and doing. I usually refer to athletes' roles as being the makers and the doers. They are the guys, the athletes who execute. And finally, co-orientation. Co-orientation, very simply, captures the common ground that exists between the coach and the athlete. Knowledge is very important. Shared knowledge is even more important. How much do the coach and the athlete know one another? Knowing one another will help coaches and athletes understand one another and therefore show empathy in one another. And here it is. The 4 C's, as we call them, provide a measure, a tangible way of understanding our relationships with the people we work very closely. So to conclude, the quality of the coach-athlete relationship is a powerful vehicle that takes you from place A to place B, hopefully a better place. And you need good quality communication, frequent communication, to make that relationship move quite swiftly from place A to place B. Now, if communication is not up to scratch or is insufficient and inadequate, the journey will be much longer and not as pleasant. And you may never even reach the place B, that better place. So, relationship and communication are essential for the creation of a positive relational climate that is both effective and successful. And if I may, I will finish with the Coach K's quote, which I really like. 2 is better than 1 if 2 can act as 1. Thank you very much.